Great. Welcome everyone to this session of Government Operations and Fiscal Policy Committee. I'm joined today with my two colleagues on the committee, Council Vice President Friedson and Council Member Katz. Today we have two items in front of us. I will ask Ms. Nadeau to join us. And we will start with, I guess they're two items, but they're together. On Expedited Bill 4-23, Administration Non-Merit Positions, Special Projects Manager, and Executive Regulation 24-22, Special Projects Manager, Office of Chief Administrator, Officer. And I know, Ms. Kashak, thank you. I was just going to call you all down to make sure you're here. And thank you for joining us as well. Ms. Nadeau, you want to walk us through it?
So the way I organized the packet is I went through the impact statements, some background on the bill, and then I did the regs second. So starting off, there was a public hearing in February, and, well, sorry, let me rewind. So what the bill does is the bill will create a special projects manager position. Currently, the county executive was one, and the bill would make an additional second special projects manager, and then the regulation amends the job description. So there was a public hearing in February, and in addition, the regulation for the bill, and then the regulation was advertised in the county register in December, and no comments were received. We received the usual impact statements. So first was the fiscal impact statement. The fiscal impact assumed an annual salary of $175,000 plus benefits. So that's the fiscal impact. The economic impact statement said insignificant impact because it's creating the position, but just creating the position on its own, of course, wouldn't have an economic impact. We also received a racial equity and social justice impact statement, which was very similar in that it said the bill itself that just creates the position would not have an impact, and we'd have to wait and see based on the work that project manager does if those additional programs have a racial equity, social justice piece. But the climate impact statement was actually stated a minimal positive impact, because one thing that bridging this digital divide does is it could provide more resources for emergency responses. So that was noted in the climate statement. So I did some history of county executive positions, because I know that's a question that's been asked and came up in some testimony and correspondence that council members have received. So under this section of the county code, which is 2-26, the county executive has 13 non-merit positions. There's 5 directors of regional service centers, a director of Office of Community Partnerships, director of strategic partnerships, 4 assistant chief administrative officers, 1 special projects manager, and 1 chief labor relations officer. And these positions have been sort of added slowly over a long period of time. So about, I think, 5 of those positions were added in 2007. The first special projects manager was added in 2008, the labor relations officer in 2019, and then the director of strategic partnerships was the most recent, and that was added in 2020. So going into the structure of the code here, something I want to note is we, of course, have received the transmittal memo from the county executive that explains what this position is for, but I do just want to flag that neither the code nor the regulation actually specify what the special projects manager has to or will do. So of course it's very helpful to know what the intent is for that position, but that's not actually written in the bill or regulation, nor is council staff recommending that it needs to be. I just wanted to flag that for the committee. So what a special projects manager does based on the regulation is basically work on special projects for the county executive. So that can include developing, coordinating, implementing various types of projects. I believe the current special projects manager works on biohealth and small business issues. So this position, based on the memo from the county executive, would work on leaping the digital divide. So this would be done in a few ways. The task that would be assigned based on that memo is coordinating efforts to increase physical infrastructure to broadband, as well as helping residents get the tools they need. So that could be providing computers, providing more access, doing digital literacy training, as well as seeking and deploying grants, creating a network of digital navigators, and as well as a resource portal. So something that's been flagged, I think, in a couple other committee sessions, I believe it was an econ committee session and then maybe an additional one as well, is the Department of Technology and Enterprise Business Solutions, which we call TEBS, does a lot of this work. Currently, they do it under the Montgomery Connect program, which is the Digital Equity and Inclusion program. And as a little bit of background, what TEBS does is they basically provide technology services to the whole county government, as well as residents. So page 4 of the memo, I list some of the things that Montgomery Connect is working on. So that includes hosting equity programs in low-income areas, distributing laptops. I think the last update was they've provided 50,000 new loaner computers, helping residents enroll in the Affordable Connectivity Program, partnering with federal, state, and other providers on bridging this digital divide. Sorry, I know I'm alternating between leaping and bridging the digital divide here. Apologies for that. And then also constructing and bringing high-speed internet over fiber to various areas of the county. I know one area that's often highlighted is our agricultural and rural areas, trying to get companies to put more physical infrastructure in those places. Something that's also come up is the funding that's provided, because one thing this position would do is help obtain more funding. So I have a list on page 5 of some of the federal and state programs that currently exist in terms of funding. So there's the Digital Equity Act, which is a grant program for digital equity and inclusion. There's the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, which has $65 billion to help close that digital divide, and that's done through NTIA grant programs. There's the Affordable Connectivity Program, which I mentioned before, that provides a discount of up to $45, a combination of federal and state money for both home and cell phone internet bills. And then of course ARPA, which we all know about, also allows some funds for expanding internet access. And then lastly, the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program, which provides money for funding the infrastructure deployment and those types of issues. So that's a summary of what the county is currently doing, what the Special Projects Manager would do, and the various funding sources that are available. I do want to quickly note, because it's kind of the smaller piece, the executive regulation. I went through it, and what it changes is it makes the current position is no longer going to report to an ACAO. And talking to the county executive, the position, especially those special project managers, will instead report to the chief administrative officer. So that's the background on the bill and the reg. And then, of course, I know, Chair Stewart, that you have an amendment. I don't know if you want, I will let you present it since it is yours.
Thank you very much for a very thorough packet and description. Before we get to the amendment, just want to turn it to Ms. Casari or Mr. Hartman-Espada, if you have anything to add to that.
No, just thank you. And I'm here on behalf of our CAO, Rich Malino, which is sick, home, couldn't be here. So thank you.
Well, we very much appreciate you pinch hitting today. Thank you for joining us. So I can start and explain the amendment that I'm going to propose today. Again, thank you for the very extensive, comprehensive packet. And, you know, I think anytime we look at adding a position to our government, we need to think carefully about what we're doing on that, and is one of the reasons why I am suggesting that we add a sunset date and say that this act must expire and must have no further force or effect after we put 3 years from the effective date. One of the reasons I am proposing this is I understand from the county exec's office the desire to have this position, particularly to take advantage of the opportunities that are out there right now to address the digital divide in our community. It is a very important issue. However, as it has been described to us and was described by Mr. Madalino when he came before the full council during public comments, it seems to me that we could look at these opportunities in the next couple of years and then reevaluate whether this needs to be a permanent position. Again, having concerns about when we think about adding to our staff and doing that with a close eye to what that means for our overall budgets and other things. So I'm putting forward that amendment, and I know Council Vice President Friedson, do you want to kick us off, and then Councilmember
Sure.
Katz.
First of all, thank you. Thank you to the chair. I appreciate it. I strongly support the amendment. I think it addresses some of the concerns that I have, and I just want to say a few things. First, I absolutely appreciate and respect the fact that the executive should have the prerogative to set up and structure a government that serves the needs of the community. And we have elections for council members and for county executives to be able to exercise those prerogatives, and that is important. But I also think that there are 42 vacancies at last count in TEBS. There are over 1,000 vacancies across county government. We had a cost efficiency work group that was set to identify only 100 vacancies, which I thought was far too low, as part of a broader restructuring effort that we've been hearing about for 4 years. It only identified 9 vacancies to eliminate, and as far as I can tell, none of those vacancies have been eliminated. And this was an opportunity in a highly unusual situation to take advantage of the highly unusual and unprecedented moment that we're in, where there are lots of programs in this area, and it's a huge need that we have, which I recognize and appreciate, to be able to repurpose positions and begin some of that restructuring and reorganizing that we've all wanted to see, and there's been agreement across both sides of the street on. And I would have preferred that happened, or that this be handled during the budget, but alas, it is not. And so I want to make it very clear that I hope and expect that we are going to take up the restructuring and the reorganization and the efficiencies during the budget, that I am going to take a deep look, and I imagine colleagues on this committee and on the council are going to heavily scrutinize, as we should, as is our job and our role. Just like the county executive should have the prerogative to set up the government, we need to do our oversight function, and we need to do a deep dive into assessing why we have so many vacancies, whether or not we should be eliminating those vacancies that aren't working. We're repurposing them to serve the functions that we need, and I think this is a good example where there is a need that we have, that we want to repurpose the functions of county government, and we should have that level of flexibility. And with this level of vacancies, we actually do have that level of flexibility, and unfortunately, it just seems time and again we haven't taken that up. So the budget's coming out in less than a week. The county executive hopefully has been thinking about this, and hopefully he is getting ahead of his budget, which has a lot of restructuring and reorganization that repurposes the functions, and just doesn't want to wait because this is such an important priority. I want to give deference to that. The fact that it's being sunsetted, I think, is a big difference, and I think will help, but I think it's the first part of the conversation that needs to continue during the budget, which is going to require a significant amount of scrutiny specifically related to the restructuring and reorganization that we have been hearing about, and the need to address the vacancies, to repurpose them to make sure that they're serving our needs, and to make sure that if they aren't serving our needs, that they be eliminating as appropriate. So I'm going to support the amendment, I'm going to support the bill, but I just wanted to make sure that we are ready and prepared as we head into the budget to do that type of deep dive, because I think it is absolutely required.
Okay. Before I turn it over to Councilmember Katz, just want to make sure if you all have anything to respond, or should we just go to Mr.
Thank you, and we actually support the amendments as well. That's a very thoughtful amendment.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and let me associate myself with much of what has been said. And I, too, am supportive of the expedited bill. I think it makes sense with the amendment, and I think we need to move forward on this. So I think we're in a unanimous opinion. So.
Great. So I think the amendment was accepted. There's support for both the bill, the expedited bill, and regulation. Is there anything else you need us to do?
No, that was it. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you very much for
Thank you
coming.
very much.
We very much appreciate it.
I learned years ago you should always take yes as an answer.
Right.
Don't keep asking. Don't keep asking. Yeah.
Thank you very much for coming today. Thank you. All right, our next item is actually,
Yes.
I'm going to turn it over to Councilmember Katz because it's his bill. It is Bill 1-23 is our first bill introduced this year, taxation property tax credit, elderly individuals and retired military service members. And I'll turn it over to Councilmember Katz.
Well, thank you very much, and we certainly can turn it to staff to lead us through. But this one is one that I believe it's received a lot of conversation. My initial concern was that somebody whose home has gone up in assessment might not be qualified or be able to take advantage of the tax credits because of that. They didn't do anything in addition to just live there, and so that was my initial concern that we raise the assessed values. Since then, we've had quite a bit of discussion, and we've heard from people that say we should lower the threshold from 40 years to 30 years to 20 years, that it shouldn't be that just a person should live in a house. It's if you lived in Montgomery County and moved on. And this one is one of those that I believe we need to do what the original bill, what the original suggestion was, get that accomplished, figure out where we are in a budget, and then have deeper conversations. Because we right now, I mean, next week we'll find out more about the budget, and what my design is that someone who is a senior, and there again, I think we should, if possible, if allowed, we should change the title from elderly individual to senior individual, or whatever that title can be. But this is so that the person who is living in their home for 40 years or more at this point can stay living in their home. And I've actually heard from some people, which shocked me candidly, that said that they thought that we shouldn't be doing this because we should encourage seniors to move to another place in Montgomery County, and therefore some other family could take over these homes. I don't believe that. I believe we should have people who have lived here their entire lives, or a significant part of their life, continue to live here in that home. That's where I am. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Katz. Ms. Ciccone, do you have anything to add?
I was hoping to, if
Absolutely,
you,
take your whatever you want to do. Yeah.
Okay. I could walk through some salient parts of the bill. And a good afternoon to the committee and to Councilmember Katz. Your observation on the use of the term elderly is noted. I just wanted to mention it comes from the enabling legislation by the state.
And I appreciate that. Are we able to change the name? If we can't, we can't. But could we change the name of the title of this legislation?
That was not something I specifically looked at, but if there is support for the change, I certainly can look and make sure. We're trying to stick with the language of the state law because the state law says you can provide, that's what the state law calls
Right,
it.
I understand.
But I think sort of substance over form, I would hope that we can change the name without changing the substance of it. But so that's something I would ask if the committee wants to support a change of the name. I can certainly look into that.
Because, Councilmember Vice President Friedson is getting closer to elderly every day, every single day. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. So if I could I will very briefly go through some of the salient parts of the bill, and it was very well explained, so I won't repeat the gist of what the bill is, but just a few things I did want to highlight in addition to what Councilmember Katz mentioned, because there were some comments at the public hearing that I thought maybe I should specifically address. We do have state enabling legislation that sets the framework for what we can do, and it's very clear about what things the county can and cannot do. One of the I think I'll jump straight to a few things I do want to mention. First of all, this is one of several credits in the code. So I just want to emphasize the fact that there are other tax credits available to residents. This particular credit is for elderly individuals and retired military services members, and it is contained in Code Section 52-110. However, we do have other provisions related to, in other provisions of the code related to limited seniors with limited income. We also have a property tax deferral program for disabled veterans and blind persons. So I did want to mention that as well. Specifically as it relates to some of the comments that came from the public hearing, one individual, and Councilmember Katz alludes to this, who talked about requesting sequential ownership. The state law says the county can provide the parameters. You can set the minimum number of years of home ownership with a maximum being not more than 40. So it can be anywhere from 0 to 40. Just by way of example, Prince George's County, I believe they have 10 years. However, specifically with regard to sequential ownership, which is what was proposed in one of the comments from the public hearing, the state law does not allow us to provide for sequential ownership. It specifically says you can set the minimum number of years, cannot exceed 40 years, but it uses the term residing in the same dwelling. So that's not something that the council has flexibility on. I'm very appreciative to the team from finance that can specifically address some of the numbers if the committee so wishes.
Yeah, sure. We formulated this based on estimates that we had both from SSTAT and multiple different data sources, including census data. And you'll see that in terms of the estimates for just these bumps, it's quite minimal, particularly in the context of a $6 billion budget. But when you start reducing the years by those decades, it drastically shifts the assumptions that you have to make, because you can't assume someone is greater than that age and has been in the house that long. So the numbers almost 20x in terms of the potential cost of property tax increases. And Todd did some great work on a model that sort of dynamically shows these values, and we can adjust however is deemed appropriate.
I did want to call out a specific provision. So I'm now at page, unfortunately the memo doesn't have page numbers. I apologize for that. I'm only noticing now that there are no page numbers on the memo, but it's the second from last page of the staff memo. I did want to call out the fact that we have an application deadline, which is usually April 1st, and because of the timing, we're proposing that it be September 1st, only for the first fiscal year. Unless there are other questions, at this point, the bill is aiming to just increase the assessed value by $50,000 from $650 to $700,000 as the threshold for eligibility.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the folks from finance for coming today and the additional analysis that you did. We very much appreciate that. So I believe we're all co-sponsors on this bill as well, and thank our colleague for introducing it. I will note that our colleague, Councilmember Jawando, it is in the packet, suggested an amendment to move the time of having a home from 40 to 20 years. I'll speak for myself. I appreciate Councilmember Jawando putting this in. I think at this time, given the analysis that was already done by finance, the fact, and I'll turn it over to my colleague in a moment, has put in for a request for an OLL report to look more in depth at these issues, as well as the fact that the racial equity and social justice impact statement that did come back on this did find a slight negative impact, but given how many people we're broadening it out to is not a large number, as you said. It wasn't a significant negative impact. My concern, and why I would like to wait for the OLO report, is that if we did increase it by a much larger number, that we may see a more significant negative impact. In addition, I'm very interested, and I believe the OLO report will cover this, is really thinking about the best way to address the true need in the community. And I've always been very interested in is 7 years, because I think people don't realize this when they hear about the tax credit, that it is for 7 years. So if you think of somebody who may own their home for 40 years, they're 65 years old, by the time they're 72, they've used it up, basically. And so I would be interested to see if actually in the future, not now, but in the future, if it would be better actually to extend that time now that we have the enabling the ability to do so under state law. So I think for those reasons, I'm with my colleague, Councilmember Katz, to move this forward as he has proposed, and look forward to the research that my colleague has requested. So turn it over to Councilmember Friedson.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I think you hit many of the points that I wanted to share, and I want to appreciate our colleague, Councilmember Katz, for sponsoring this. This is important, but it's a very modest and measured proposal, and the way I view it, and I don't want to put words into the sponsor's mouth, but it really allows the existing credit to keep up with the market changes. It really isn't dramatically changing what's being offered, and for that reason it doesn't have a massive fiscal impact on the county's budget, and it also doesn't impact thousands of people. It impacts a much more modest number of people. As colleagues noted, I had requested an Office of Legislative Oversight report, understanding that we've been given more flexibility by the state and wanting to look into what are reasonable, measured ways that we can support our aging adult population. I don't know if that's an okay terminology, Councilmember Katz. For the moment, I will change it at your discretion and advice, but we should be looking into this, but we need to do it in a measured and thoughtful way. We need to make sure that it's being targeted to those who need it. We need to make sure that it makes sense and serves communities throughout the county, understanding that we have lower income people in jurisdictions all around and in districts all around the county, and the home value alone is not necessarily a measure of the financial wherewithal of the people in it. It is one measure, but it is not the only measure. So there are a number of different factors that the OLO report is helping us look into to have a better understanding of who we will be impacting, how we will be impacting them, and what the cost is, because ultimately we're making a priority decision here of what is the benefit, what is the cost, and whether or not it serves our priorities. So I look forward to supporting this today. Really appreciate what we're doing here, and very much looking forward to some thoughts and proposals that I'll be moving forward after we have the OLO report and have a chance to really do a deep dive into how we use this program and how we utilize the authority that we now have from the state to make the greatest impact that we could have on residents that we want. And I will close by saying we all agree, regardless of any decisions that we make, of how important our long-term residents are to the fabric of our communities. Their involvement, their volunteerism, their economic impact, their knowledge is critical, and we want to do all that we can to keep them here so that residents can age in place, can age in community, and that they can continue contributing to Montgomery County as they have for so many years. So I really appreciate this, and I'll yield back to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Ms. Coney, anyone else have anything to add?
I have nothing extra to add, no. I did want to mention that I had actually invited, just because of the issues that had come up in the racial equity and social justice statement, I had invited Jean-Marie Pena to be available if you had questions. So if you have none, I have nothing else to add.
No, but thank you so much for your work on the racial equity and social justice statement. They're excellent. So So thank you. No, so I think the three takeaways are, one, we were going to look into whether or not we can change the name. If not, I think there's agreement on the technical amendment that was proposed by staff, and then with that technical amendment to move this forward to the full council as proposed by Councilmember Katz.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, well, that was a very efficient government operations meeting today. I want to thank the staff for their excellent work and my colleagues. And with that, we are done for the afternoon. Thank you.